The purpose of the bill, broadly, is to amend the Commonwealth criminal laws to introduce new offences relating to extremist or terrorist behaviour and to amend some existing laws relating to that behaviour. Particularly, and its main purpose is to introduce offences relating to the displaying or trading in hate symbols, such as Nazi symbols and also the Islamic State flag. And this follows the introduction and discussion of similar offences, as I said, throughout Australia. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I rise to speak on the Counter-Terrorism Legislation Amendment, Prohibited Hate Symbols and Other Measures Bills of 2023. At the outset, this legislation refers to prohibited hate symbols. I thought it helpful, Deputy Speaker, to consider first the importance of symbols in our community and to a society overall. Symbols are used to define groups. Symbols are a unifier. They convey immediately recognisable meanings that are shared by societies. Symbols create and communicate the values and traditions of a country, of a group, of a club, and indeed of a world. Deputy Speaker, if you think of some of our most iconic Australian symbols, our coat of arms, our Australian flag, the Southern Cross, the celebratory green and gold of our national sporting teams, the black, red and yellow of the Aboriginal flag, the baggy green of our Australian cricketers, a sprig of wattle, the slouch hat that symbolises the Australian digger. These are all symbols very important to Australians that all reflect our way of life. They are also immediately recognisable and immediately bring to mind a particular value unique to Australia. Then we have internationally recognised symbols, Deputy Speaker, the peace sign, the Red Cross, yin and yang, the love heart, again, instantly recognised and instantly bring about a certain feeling when those symbols are seen. However, Deputy Speaker, in 2023, just as we have some powerfully beautiful symbols, world history and culture have also delivered some symbols that have generated and continue to generate hatred, violence and genocide. Particularly, I'm referring to Nazi symbols. For these symbols, in the 1930s in Germany, provided a rallying cry around which united and incited ordinary people to support whole-scale anti-Semitism, and ultimately these symbols assisted to establish a regime that murdered 6 million Jewish people. In the modern era, terrorists and extremist groups use hate symbols to generate, support, to incite and commit terrible acts of violence. And again, in our modern era with the internet, a lot of this transmission of these symbols is done through the internet and is radicalising our younger people. As a result of this, several states and territories, most in fact throughout Australia, have introduced legislation, and private bills have also been introduced at the Commonwealth level to try to counter this proliferation of the communication of hate symbols. And so, Deputy Speaker, the purpose of the bill, broadly, is to amend the Commonwealth criminal laws to introduce new offences relating to extremist or terrorist behaviour and to amend some existing laws relating to that behaviour. Particularly, and its main purpose is to introduce offences relating to the displaying or trading in hate symbols, such as Nazi symbols and also the Islamic State flag. And this follows the introduction and discussion of similar offences, as I said, throughout Australia. There's been very widespread consultation, I note, on this bill as well. The bill also includes amendments relating to the use of a carriage service for violent extremist material and to broaden the scope of the offence of advocating terrorism. The bill will also change the way that organisations have been listed already as terrorist organisations are then delisted. And so the bill's stated intention, Deputy Speaker, is to complement state laws and extend to matters where the Commonwealth has particular responsibilities, including those with respect to trade and the online environment. It is noted that since 2022, New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania and the ACT have legislated offences for publicly displaying Nazi symbols, while Queensland and South Australia have similar bills before their parliaments. Western Australia has similarly announced an intention to introduce such legislation. And I particularly commend the work that has been done in this place. I note particularly my friend, the member for Ware, in May of this year introduced a bill that similarly sought to prohibit and criminalise the public display of Nazi symbols. This also included the making of the Nazi salute. I note that that provision has not made its way into this bill, but it has been indicated that that work to police the salute, using the Nazi salute, will remain the jurisdiction of the state and territory police services. It's also heartening to see, Deputy Speaker, that there have been several other countries internationally that have brought in similar legislation, and that includes Germany, France and Austria. So if I get to the particulars of the legislation, there are 4 particular schedules that will seek to amend the existing Commonwealth Criminal Code. First, and most importantly, it is now a new criminal offence.
A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division.
The member for Hughes in continuation.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. So, Deputy Speaker, Schedule 1 establishes a new criminal offence for the public display of prohibited Nazi and Islamic State symbols. It also makes it an offence to trade in goods that bear a prohibited Nazi or Islamic State symbol. Schedule 2 establishes a new criminal offence for using a carriage service for violent extremist material and possessing or controlling violent extremist material obtained or accessed during a carriage service. And as I said earlier, Deputy Speaker, in these days when we are seeing, unfortunately, through the internet, a lot of radicalisation of younger people, this is a particularly important new offence and a particularly new power that will be given to our criminal law enforcement officers. Schedule 3 expands the existing offence of advocating terrorism to include instructing on the doing of a terrorist act and praising the doing of a terrorist act in specified circumstances. It also, importantly, increases the maximum penalty for the advocating terrorism offence from 5 to 7 years imprisonment. The 4th schedule removes the sunsetting requirements for instruments which list terrorist organisations. That's particularly important because at the moment, Deputy Speaker, we have a situation where terrorist organisations are listed but then are automatically taken off that list after a 3-year period. This provision requires the minister responsible for the AFP to actually take steps to remove the organisation from the terrorist organisation list as soon as practicable, in circumstances only where the minister has formed the view that an organisation no longer meets the terrorist listing threshold. So again, that is another important safeguard that has been put into this legislation. Deputy Speaker, the bill does contain carve-outs. It contains broad exemptions for the display of a prohibited symbol where there is a religious, academic, educational, artistic, literary or scientific purpose and the display is not contrary to the public interest. And this is, of course, important, Deputy Speaker, particularly with regards to our education establishments. The bill overall sends a very strong signal to extremist and terrorist groups that Australia is strong and resolute in stamping out hate symbols and, by extension, in stamping out extremist behaviour and terrorist groups, including the behaviour which those groups seek to incite. The bill will not in any way impede upon Australians' freedom of religion and freedom of worship, and nor should it. Deputy Speaker, we live in the most successful multicultural country in the world. Thousands and thousands of people arrive in Australia every year to enjoy the freedoms and peace that Australia offers. Many of these people have fled from countries where extremists and terrorist groups proliferate, often largely unchecked. This is not the sort of life that we want here in Australia. That is why this is a very good bill, because it is sending a message that Australians want to maintain their existing way of life and not the way of life of people who are conveying these symbols. So the bill is a further step in safeguarding this way of life. Symbols used to incite hatred, loathing and violence are unacceptable, particularly unacceptable in our country. Deputy Speaker, I commence this speech speaking of symbols of peace, of love, and those that embody the Australian spirit and way of life. It is hoped, with a bill such as this, that when it becomes legislation, it will be sending that message that they are the symbols that we wish to see. Let us see more symbols, for example, of the dove of peace or our sprigs of wattle, rather than symbols that convey hatred and loathing. This bill overall will assist our Commonwealth law enforcement officers to deal with radicalisation, to deal with advocacy of terrorism and incitement of violence. For all of those reasons, Deputy Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time.